My name is Mason Harper. I'm 29 years old and I live in Seattle, Washington. This happened just over 2 years ago, but to this day, I still can't understand what really happened that night. At that time, I was dating Grace, a girl who seemed like she stepped out of a fairy tale, full of life, with a smile that put anyone at ease. She was my peace, and I knew she saw me that way too. It was Valentine's Day and everything was perfect. I had prepared a dinner at home with candles, flowers, and soft music playing in the background. I was excited for her to arrive. Grace was coming back from a work event and we were texting the whole time. She was on her way home and told me, "I'm almost there." I was excited. I just wanted her there with me. Nothing prepared me for what was about to happen. The wait became longer. 10 minutes later, I sent her a message. "Is everything okay, love? Are you all right?" There was no response. I thought it was strange, but maybe she had her phone in her bag or couldn't get to it at the moment. I called her. No answer. Once, twice, 3 times, nothing. I started to get worried. It wasn't like Grace to be so hard to contact. She always replied quickly, always kept me updated. I became restless. Something was wrong. I decided to leave the house and check around the streets, but I knew it wouldn't make sense. She was just a little way off. Why wouldn't she tell me? Maybe she was stuck in traffic. Still, anxiety started to consume me. That's when I got the call. It was from a number I didn't recognize. At first, I thought it was a prank, something that would make me pass out, but it wasn't. It was the police. The officer introduced himself and asked if I knew Grace. I almost froze. I said yes, she was my girlfriend. He paused for a long time. I could tell something was wrong, but what he said next made me collapse on the floor. Grace had been found dead on a road outside the city. He said she seemed to have been the victim of a robbery, that her purse and phone were missing, and they needed me to come to the station to clarify a few things. Those words still echo in my head. She was found dead. I couldn't process it. I felt lost. I didn't know what to do. The officer asked me to wait until the next morning and hung up. I don't remember what I did after that. I spent the rest of the night pacing, walking back and forth. My mind was in pieces. How did this happen? She was on her way home. It was impossible for her to have been a victim of something like that. I rifled through my phone, read and reread our last conversation, trying to find an explanation, but all I could find were messages full of love and plans for the future. She was so excited. Everything seemed fine. The last thing she said to me was, "I'm almost there." I couldn't stop thinking about that sentence. I was almost beginning to lose my mind when my phone buzzed again. I looked at the screen and saw the notification of a message. I didn't think twice and opened it. It was from Grace's number. The message said simply, "I'm almost there." The problem was that Grace was dead. There was no way she could have sent that message. I started shaking. I scrolled through the screen, trying to understand, trying to find some explanation, but the phone was frozen, with nothing else. I panicked. Grace's phone had been found, but it was without a signal. How was this message getting to me? I went to my computer, opened her social media account, trying to find something, any clue. All I found were news stories about similar accidents, but nothing that made sense with what I was going through. Then, after a few days, I went to the place where she was found, hoping to find some clue, but I found nothing. No answers. No explanation. The following days were marked by more messages, always from the same source. "I'm almost there." I would look at the screen and feel that same sense of fear, but I couldn't stop. When I thought everything was over, a new notification would come. What terrified me the most was that the number was deactivated, just like Grace's number, but the message still appeared. I didn't know what to do. After a few months, the feeling started to fade. But to this day, I can't help but check my phone every time it vibrates, expecting to see those words, "I'm almost there." Sometimes I fear that she will really arrive, and when that happens, I don't know what will make sense anymore. That "I'm almost there" stays in my mind like a shadow that never disappears. Maybe one day I'll understand what really happened, but for now, it's a mystery that haunts me every night. The only thing I know for sure is that there's something very wrong with that phone. Something I'll never forget. My name is Melissa, I'm 29 years old, and I live in Portland, Oregon. I'm going to tell you something that happened to me and my boyfriend, Ethan, 2 years ago on Valentine's Day. To this day, I still try to understand what exactly we experienced that night. All I know is that I haven't been able to go near that place again. It all started when we decided to do something special. We're not the type of couple that enjoys crowded places, so we spent hours looking for a quiet and different spot to have dinner. That's when we came across a recommendation on a local restaurant website. It was a small Italian restaurant called Bella Notte, located on the outskirts of the city in a more isolated area. The reviews said it was charming and unique, perfect for couples seeking an intimate experience. It seemed ideal. The location was a little out of the way, but the descriptions and the photos on the website convinced us. A rustic environment, with candles on the tables and an old house vibe. We called to make a reservation, but no one answered. I found it strange, but since it was a small restaurant, I figured they only accepted reservations in person. We decided to risk it and went there. The road was deserted, full of curves, and had few lights, which started making me feel uneasy. We arrived at the location around 7:30 p.m. The building was exactly like the pictures, but it looked much more run down. The paint was peeling, the windows were opaque, and the Bella Notte sign flickered intermittently, as if it might go out at any moment. I jokingly told Ethan it looked like a horror movie set. He laughed and told me not to judge before we went inside. When we parked, I noticed there were no other cars around. No customers, no staff, nobody. I hesitated, but Ethan insisted that we were already there, so it wouldn't hurt to try. We went in. The door creaked in a way that made my heart race. Inside, the place was even stranger. The tables were set with silverware and glasses, but there was a thin layer of dust on everything. It smelled like mildew mixed with something faintly sweet, like dead flowers. We tried calling for someone, but no one appeared. Ethan went up to the counter and found a bell to call the waiter. He rang it, and the sound echoed through the empty restaurant. It was then I noticed. There was no background music, no sounds coming from the kitchen, nothing, just the heavy silence. I suggested we leave, but Ethan, always curious, decided to explore further. He walked to the kitchen door while I stayed near the entrance, looking around. Suddenly I heard a low noise, like whispers. I turned to look, but I saw no one. I called for Ethan, but he didn't answer. My heart started to race. I ran to the kitchen, but he wasn't there. The lights started flickering, and the noise grew louder, as if many people were whispering at once. But it wasn't just that. It was as if someone were walking around the hall, moving the chairs and silverware. I ran back to the entrance, and there was Ethan, standing there, staring at the main door. I went up to him and asked what was happening, but he didn't answer. He looked like he was in a trance, staring at the door. When I tried to open it, I realized it was locked, and there was no visible lock. It was as if the door simply wouldn't open. Ethan finally snapped out of it, but he was pale and sweating. He said he had heard someone call his name right next to his ear. We tried to open the windows, but they were sealed shut. Panic started to set in. I heard laughter and footsteps all around us, but there was no one there. Ethan tried using his phone, but there was no signal. That's when things started to get worse. The lights went out completely, leaving the restaurant in total darkness. The only sound was silverware falling to the ground and chairs being dragged. It felt like the restaurant was full of people, but we couldn't see anyone. Ethan grabbed his phone's flashlight, and we decided to look for an exit through the back. We walked through the kitchen, which seemed bigger than necessary, with hallways that shouldn't have been there. The further we went, the more it felt like we were getting lost. The whispers kept going, now clearer, as if they were speaking about us. We couldn't understand what they were saying, but it sounded like reproach, almost mocking. When we finally found a door in the back, it wouldn't open either. That's when we heard a loud noise from the dining room, like someone had knocked over a whole table. We ran back to see what it was, but the place was exactly the same. Everything in its place, but now there were handprints on the windows and walls. They were small, like from children. Ethan started screaming for help, but I knew no one would come. The feeling of being trapped in a place that didn't want us there was overwhelming. Time seemed to have stopped, and fear took over. Every second it felt like we were farther away from any exit. That's when, in the middle of all that panic, something strange happened. The lights flickered back on, and as if being summoned, the sound of soft music began to play. It was an old melody, almost hypnotic, but in a very unsettling way. It felt like we were being forced to listen to something we didn't want to hear. Ethan stood frozen, his face a look of pure terror, more than I could bear. I, on the other hand, was panicking, but a part of me was still trying to stay calm, looking for a way out, any way out. Suddenly, the voices stopped. The hall was silent again, and the lights went out. Then the front door opened. I didn't know if it was a trap or if we were being released, but that was our chance. We ran like never before, not looking back. I could barely breathe as I pulled Ethan by the hand, who didn't say a word. When we finally got to the car, I started it on the first turn of the key, and we sped off with the tires screeching. I felt like if I looked in the rearview mirror, I would still see that restaurant, but with something much worse waiting. When we got home, everything seemed normal, but in a strange way. I looked at Ethan, and he was completely silent. I didn't know if he was as terrified as I was or if he was trying to understand what had happened. I just know that when I tried to look up information about the restaurant, I found nothing. No information, no reviews, nothing. Bellanotte seemed to have been erased from every source. In the days that followed, something still bothered me. I couldn't understand what it was. It was like that place had disappeared from everyone's collective memory, as if it had never existed. Ethan confessed that since that night he felt like something was always watching him, like something from that place was still following him, though he never saw anything physically. But the whispers, the footsteps, they were still there. I tried to leave Portland months later, trying to put that terror behind me. But sometimes I hear something familiar when everything is too quiet. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, I realize that the soft music that played in the restaurant still haunts me. And I fear that, somehow, it's not over yet. My name is Brandon, I'm 32 years old, and I live in Denver, Colorado. This story happened 4 years ago, but I still can't understand what happened. It was Valentine's Day, and I was with my then-girlfriend Sarah at a park here in the city. It was one of those perfect days for taking some photos. The sky was clear, the sun was gentle, everything seemed wonderful. We decided to take a selfie, a moment for ourselves, you know? We were laughing, happy, and the idea was just to capture our happiness on that day. She held the phone in front of us and took the first picture. I glanced at the screen quickly and everything seemed fine. But when she pulled the phone up to take a closer look, her smile disappeared. I didn't notice at first, but she looked like she had seen something wrong. "Brandon, do you see this?" she said, her voice trembling. I leaned in to look at the screen and there it was. In the corner, between us, right near our heads, was a face. It didn't look like anyone in particular, but it was a clear face, almost like it had been taken from somewhere. The problem was there was no one near us when we took the photo. I was a bit confused, trying to understand what it was and thinking maybe it was some mistake with the camera, so we decided to take a few more pictures to see if it would repeat, and it did, in every picture. Not one, not two, but all of them. In each one, there it was. That face, right in the same spot between us. A face with large eyes, fixed, and an expression that I can't explain it well. It was as if it was watching us, but not in a normal way, like someone just looking at a photo. It was like it was there with some strange purpose. The feeling kept growing. I started getting goosebumps, like it was a reflection of the presence of that thing. Of course, I tried to find some logical explanation. Maybe it was a reflection, something on the lens, some sort of thing like that. So, we moved to another place in the park, tried taking photos from different angles, but nothing changed. The face was still there, in every picture. I started to get uncomfortable and Sarah was clearly uneasy, but she was trying to hide it, like she was waiting for this to just be some simple technical failure. By late afternoon, we were ready to leave, but the feeling of unease wouldn't leave me alone. We were walking to the parking lot when Sarah stopped me, looking at me with an expression I'd never seen before. "Brandon, what is that?" she asked, showing me the phone screen. I looked at the photo, and there it was again, but now the face was different. It seemed like it was closer, clearer, as if it was getting closer to us, not in a distant spot like in the earlier pictures. The sensation was chilling, like someone was watching us very closely with intent. When we got home, I couldn't stop looking at the photos. I grabbed the phone, my hands trembling, and went through each one, analyzing every detail. The face was in all of them, like it had been placed there on purpose, and every time it seemed closer, more real. I decided to do some research online, to look up something about phenomena like this. I didn't know what I was searching for, but I thought there might be some scientific explanation for it. I couldn't find anything that fully explained it, just vague things about ghostly faces or distorted images. That's when a thought crossed my mind. I looked at Sarah and asked, "Did you notice that this started happening the moment we took the first picture in the park? It wasn't before." She looked at me, her face pale, and said she had noticed too, but didn't want to believe what I was thinking. We couldn't ignore what was happening anymore. The next day, I deleted all the photos, but the feeling of discomfort lingered. It felt like, somehow, those images were imprinted on me, as if something had attached itself to our memory of that day. No matter what we did, we couldn't shake the feeling that something strange was watching us. What scares me the most is that we can't explain the face, or the fact that it appeared consistently in all the photos. There was never anyone near us. We never saw anyone who could have been responsible for that. And the face wasn't anyone we knew. What was that? What did they want from us? Even today, we've never gone back to that park on that day. And whenever I see photos from that Valentine's Day, I can't help but look at the background, searching for something I can't see, but that I know is there. My name is Ashton. I'm 32 years old. I live in Houston, Texas, and I'm going to share something that happened to me on Valentine's Day a few years ago. I've always been a skeptic. I never believed in ghosts or inexplicable phenomena, but what I lived through that night left me speechless. To this day, I try to find a logical explanation, but nothing makes sense. It was Valentine's Day, and like any couple, Emily and I planned to spend the evening together. We made simple plans. Dinner at home, wine, and a good movie. She was working as usual and sent me a message earlier saying she'd be back soon. I used the time alone to set everything up and make the place perfect for both of us. The day was normal until around 5 p.m. when my phone rang. The number was unknown, which already made me a little uncomfortable. I answered, thinking it was some kind of mistake or maybe a telemarketing call. However, when I said hello, I heard muffled laughter on the other end. I felt suspicious but thought maybe it was some sort of prank from a friend. I hung up and ignored it. Half an hour later, the phone rang again, the same unknown number. This time, I decided to answer once more. When I spoke, the same muffled laughter came through, but then someone whispered my name. Ashton. It was so strange and unsettling that, at the moment, I thought it was just one of my friends messing with me. I asked who they were, but the call dropped. I was left with a strange feeling, but I tried to move on, brushing it off. Around 7 p.m, the call repeated. Again, I heard the laughter, and after that, my name being whispered. I was starting to get irritated, and at the same time, uneasy. I decided to try calling back, but the number wouldn't pick up. It was as if the number was being deliberately avoided. Every time I tried, the call dropped, or it just wouldn't connect. I couldn't understand why someone would want to bother me like this. By 8:30 p.m, Emily arrived. She was smiling, carrying a bouquet she had picked up on the way. I tried to hide my discomfort and told her everything was ready for our dinner. However, deep down, I still had that strange feeling that something wasn't right. I briefly mentioned the calls, but Emily just laughed it off and said it was probably just a prank, maybe a wrong number. While she got ready, I grabbed my phone and saved the unknown number. I did a quick search online, but didn't find anything useful. Still, I tried to calm down, but by 9 p.m, the phone rang again. I was sitting with Emily on the couch, and now, with the phone in hand, I looked at her. She suggested we answer, so I put the call on speakerphone. What happened next is what really scared me. I heard the muffled laughter once more, and then the whispering voice, clearer than ever. Ashton. I froze, and Emily immediately sensed that something was wrong, like the voice was closer, as if it was in our house. I asked out loud, "Who are you?" But before I could get an answer, the call dropped abruptly. Emily grabbed her phone to see if it was a problem with mine, but what she found was even more unsettling. She had kept her phone off all day, but when she turned it back on, the call history showed multiple calls made throughout the day, all to the same number. It didn't make sense. I knew Emily hadn't touched her phone at all, and yet the calls had come from there. She tried to reassure me, but something inside me felt like there was no explanation for this. We tried blocking the number, but 5 minutes later the call came again. Once more I answered, but this time the muffled laughter turned into something more disturbing. The worst part was when the voice whispered, "Emily, it was impossible. She was sitting right next to me. How could that happen? How could the voice know her name too?" That feeling of fear took over me. I ended the call, feeling as if we were being watched. Emily was as confused as I was, but before we could discuss it further, the phone rang again. This time, it was from my own mother's number. But when I answered, all I heard was the same muffled sound and distorted laughter. That was the last call of the day. After that, the phone went silent. There were no more calls, nothing. But to this day, whenever Valentine's Day approaches, a strange feeling takes over me. I always wonder, what happened that night? Where did those calls come from? To this day, I have no idea. I've never received another call from that number or any other strange numbers. But that feeling, the feeling that something inexplicable happened that night, has never left me. Sometimes I catch myself wondering if somehow the answer is out there, somewhere, waiting to be discovered.